Vice Chairperson Bob McCool.
Here.
Commissioners Rita Dozell.
Here.
Joanne Eaton.
Here.
Phyllis Harden here. Bob Momartz.
Yes, here.
Rochelle Rittmaster. Tom Rickert. Jim Sawtell. Attorney Liz Cross.
Here.
Planner Fred Fox.
Here. Thank you. Item number 3 is public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items. Anyone in the public want to make some comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, election of a planning commission chair. The reason this is on here is the code requires that we re-elect or elect a new planning commission chair every year. And Fred, you want to give some more information on that?
Well, just a little bit, I think informally, the administration of the Planning Commission occurs in chapter, I believe it's 2 of the code. It's not even in chapter 16 is what the land use regulations are. And in the past, we have sort of, the Planning Commission is allowed by code to adopt their own rules. However, I think in the past, we've informally, the chairman has served until he comes up or she comes up to an election or decides either to run and win or not run. And at that point, we usually would appoint, obviously, a new chairman and a vice chairman. I think in reviewing the code again, the staff and the legal team, I think, feel we ought to stick with the wording in Chapter 2 where we're supposed to re-elect or have a new choice of a chairman every year. So we'll do it that way, whatever they say. So
Okay.
that's sort of the background there.
Okay.
I move to re-elect Clint Folsom as chair of the Planning Commission.
I second that.
Second that.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Eden, second by Commissioner Dozell. All those in favor?
Aye.
I guess I vote for myself.
Sure you
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the re-election. Moving on to item number 5.
I think we have to re-elect the vice chair too, then, don't we?
Yeah, we should. We don't have to?
It only says chair. So
The chair?
if you want to do it.
And right now,
He's
Bob is the
Oh, no, I
vice
know it's
chairman.
stuff, but that's just...
Do we want to do that?
Might as well,
Okay.
to be consistent,
Okay.
we vote on a vice chair
Well, that's what I-
in the same manner.
I'd like to nominate Bob McCool as vice chair.
Commissioner Momart says a motion,
Second.
second by Commissioner Eden. All those in favor? Unanimous? Okay, good.
All right, now.
Thank you for pointing that out. Next on our item is consent agenda, approval of the December 3rd, 2013 minutes. Anyone have any comments on the December 3rd meeting minutes? Seeing no comments, do we have a motion to approve the December 3rd meeting minutes?
I so move.
Commissioner Eden, motion to approve. Second by Commissioner McCool. All those in favor? Passes unanimous. Item number 6 is approval of a recommendation of the Board of Trustees of an amendment to the Town of Superior roadway design criteria and standards. We have a staff presentation.
Alex Arnell, Director of Public Works and Utilities. And we're here tonight to present the update and amendment to the town's roadway criteria and standards. And just a little background, the last time we had Planning Commission and the town board had approved this was in 2003. And at that time, most of the focus was on planning type issues like how wide a road should be, should have sidewalks, things of that nature. With this update, we really aren't getting into a lot of planning issues, so I know a lot of this stuff may be not of particular appeal to the Planning Commission, but we focus more on how they're going to be constructed, the structural thickness of the roadway, how the asphalt specs and things of that nature. And the reason why we're doing it now is that the town center is obviously starting up, and we have Cold Creek Crossing, and we have Calmonte, so we have several developments that are starting up, and we want to take a look at at the roadway design standards to make sure they have the latest guidance from the industry standards and so forth to make sure they're built because of all the problems that we've had in town from some of the poor construction we've had. So we're really focusing on the construction standards. So again, last it was amended in 2003. It provides guidance for designing and constructing town streets and other facilities. So we reviewed the standards, went through all of them, and also looked at other standards, industry practices, and so forth, and tried to update the standards wherever we felt they needed to be updated. So what we provided here are, we provided 3 documents, the actual new standards that are dated December 2013 is when we went through and actually made all the changes. Then we provided red lines for you in the text, and also drawing red lines provided with PDF drawing tools. So we have a consolidated single PDF that has all of them in there. So I'd like to now turn it over to Dave Heinrich, who is our civil engineer, and he's been overseeing the revision of the standards.
Good evening, Dave Heinrich, Public Works Civil Engineer. So I'll just kind of give a brief overview. A lot of this is in the memo, but I'll kind of point out some of the high points, and then I'm figuring we can do kind of question and answer session at the end of any questions you may have. So starting with Chapter 1, and actually through all these, there were formatting issues that were, because it was a previous word formatting getting up to latest standards as things moved around. So if you look at the red lines, it's busy, especially Chapter 3, with a lot of just formatting things and trying to make them look correctly, or look correct. Deleting references to Superior Metropolitan District now that the town has taken over. So we're trying to, in the whole document, update to current town departments and making sure the references are correct. The planning department has been changed to planning commission, those sorts of things. Again, trying to get some of the, who can approve certain things, fixed, because again, there's references to departments or staff people that don't necessarily exist, so just trying to make that all consistent. Updating many of the reference documents and references to things from 2001 and older, so a lot of them taking out the actual dates and just saying latest edition, those sorts of things. And also there were many references to SMD stormwater regulations, and now that's been replaced by the Chapter 11 Town of Superior Municipal Code. So again, just making that update. And one minor thing, there are 2 figures in there that we moved into all of our standard details, so we just kept all of our drawings consolidated. Chapter 2 is pretty simple, again, formatting references to the various town departments, and there was some cross-referencing that we fixed in Chapter 3. There was some duplication of information. We have a table in Chapter 3 that covered some of the information in Chapter 2, so we just got rid of that and cleaned that up a little bit. And the biggest section that we fixed, or updated, I guess, is really the Chapter 3 that deals with the pavement design. And really, as Alex mentioned, the big goal of this was trying to avoid some of the issues we've been having with some of the town streets that were built back with Rocket Cranch and those sorts of things, where the subgrade was not prepared properly, and now we're seeing the effects of that and having to do very expensive repairs. So we brought a geotechnical consultant on board to help us kind of wade through some of the latest and greatest ways of calculating, the pavement subgrade strength and those sorts of things. So a lot of the changes are reflective of that effort. Also trying to get into some of the pavement design report requirements and cleaning that up a little bit. This dynamic resilient modulus is a new method of testing for subgrade strength that we've added that was not around back in 2003. The parameters for subgrade stabilization wasn't really clear in the original document how we would like subgrade stabilization to take place, so we tried to clear that up, and we've got references to CDOT specifications. And there was an update to this equivalent single axle loads, ESAL, which is a new way of basically measuring the loads on a road and how much traffic it has, and figuring out how much pavement you need, those sorts of things. Table 3.4 is where we talk about the minimum pavement sections, and the previous document had a pretty pretty thin sections, and we beef that up, and the main reason is we want to be able to come in and maintain our streets without having to fully repave them every time. So if you have a thin section of asphalt, if you want to come back and do a mill and an overlay, and you don't have enough asphalt, when you mill it, you'll completely deteriorate the bottom layer of asphalt. So we're beefing up some of the minimum sections for the specific purpose of being able to come back later and do mill and overlay projects that are cheaper than full reconstruction. Referencing CDOT specs in many locations, so table 3.4, updated section 3.4 on the pavement design procedure referencing to CDOT specs. And there was this there was a section on this allowing a 1-year warranty instead of a 2-year warranty on our pavement. If you did, basically if you left it low for a little while you were doing the rest of your work and then came back, and we decided that we'd rather just have a 2-year warranty and not allow for this, other alternative. And also updated the section on rigid pavement. This was something that I forgot to put in the memo, so I apologize on that. We added technical specifications for asphalt, for concrete, and for pavement markings. This is basically guidance to the contractor on what sort of products to use, installation requirements, those sorts of things. So it's much more in-depth than kind of roadway design standards. Most municipalities have specifications on their products, and these were lacking, so we wanted to make sure we got something in to get some teeth into some of the documents that we're holding the contractors to. And then, so the details at the back, we made some updates on those. I can go through these quickly. Again, the figure 1.1 and 1.2 moved out of Chapter 1 and into the standard drawings. These nomograph tables, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, have been taken out of Chapter 3. That method really isn't used anymore for pavement design. A lot of it's handled with programs and that sort of thing, so we've removed those out. I've added a revision date to all of our title blocks so that we can track as we're making smaller revisions. We can make sure that whoever's putting the details into their plan set, that they have the most current ones. We added some cross-references to some of the utility standards and tried to delete. There were a couple that were overlapping with utility standards, so we're trying to just get that cleaned up. We've revised the curb drain detail and added a clean-out detail for the curb drain specifically. This is the drain that goes behind the curb and gutter to help to alleviate some of the groundwater issues we have. Added truncated domes, which are the little dome pieces to the ramps to get up to current ADA standards. These details were all added, raised crosswalks, sidewalk replacement. That's basically if you're coming in and doing actual sidewalk replacement. Curb ramp notes, another type of curb ramp that we'll see more often in town. Some sidewalk chases for existing sidewalks. And sections for those sidewalk chases, and then typical pavement sections and how they need to be put together. Updated trench patch and manhole room adjustment details, and then also deleted a few details. The type R inlet details are the ones that you see that go behind, kind of go into the sidewalk. Town utility standards and CDOT cover those really well. I didn't see any reason to keep them in the roadway standards. And concrete pavement joints, CDOT, again, has this really well covered, and our details pretty much mimic that, so I figured let's get rid of them and just reference the CDOT. And then the standard barricade is again, is a standard CDOT detail. And that's it. That was quick. So.
Okay. Thank you. So what you're looking for from us tonight is comments, questions, and then an eventual recommendation to move it forward. Okay. All right, let's dive in. Who would like to start?
I've got a
Commissioner McCool.
couple. Let's see. Just document questions. Page 232. Sorry, it's a big document. I'm trying to get there.
The PDFs should be.
I think this is in two places. They're just wanting to, it looks like there's this sidewalk width, and the change really was, in special cases, sidewalk may be attached to the back with town, or town engineer, but actually I think that was okay. So this is, I mean, we're changing this from town board to town engineer. I mean, it's worth just bringing up and asking. Why it was the town board in the first place, or why it makes sense?
I'm not sure why it was the town board in the first place. It seemed like, the decision to adjust the standard width of a sidewalk could certainly be a staff level decision. So we thought that would be a good change. I don't know if we need to bring that level of detail to every town board.
No, yeah, that's cool.
That was about the setback from, the 7-foot setback taking it to a 0 setback from the curb edge. I had a question about this.
Yeah, no, go ahead, yeah.
And I guess my question was, when would that ever come up? Because it would seem like that detail would be defined in a PD. And I mean, for town center, for instance, we want the sidewalk adjacent to the curb edge, and that's defined in the PD. So I guess my question was, when would that ever come up that the town engineer would even need to do that, make that, that
Right. I mean,
drastic
most of those decisions are made during the planning process at the PD or the FDP level, but there may be some specific cases where, they have an instance where they can't get that, or whatever was in the PD for a specific reason, and, that's where the town engineer may, make that change. Most of those decisions are made at the PD level.
Was that the case on Coal Creek Drive? Was that when we did that streetscape?
That was one. I mean, you're going to see it, for example, in Kelmont Day 2, and I think you saw it, the concept plan, because they're proposing on one side of the street having attached walk and not having a parkway strip, and so that'll be an item of discussion when you review their drawings, because they're proposing not to have the parkway strip on the local road, and they'll have some specific reasons for that, and you'll get a chance to weigh in on that particular issue. when it comes for you.
That's part of the PD.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a question, though, I had to mark that spot too, because it says, the sidewalk width of 5 feet as a minimum and 7 feet from the curb. Well, and it wasn't clear, I don't think, in here, when do these rules and standards apply? If one is more, usually what the town municipal code says is if the municipal code is more a higher standard or more restrictive, or in this case, wider than what is being proposed, then the one that's to the advantage of the town, or more higher standards or more restrictive, whichever way you want to look at it, is the one that applies. So I wasn't real clear when we were saying this, because some places we talk about planned developments and the PD, we never mentioned PD plan in the document, but it's kind of a question again, when are these standards applied versus...
Well, these are the base, these are the town standards, so when someone's going to be designing or laying out a PD, they're going to go to this, well, what's your street width, what's your sidewalk width, and they're going to start with this and see if they can lay it out, and then sometimes they're going to have problems doing that for topographical ways or for the concept of the development, like in Calmonte 2, they have, the way it's stepped out, and they have senior people, and they want to have attached curbs so people can get outside the door and get on an attached sidewalk. They're going to have a variance from this, and they're going to come to you and say, as part of this development, here's why we don't want to follow these.
Okay, that's why it said town board before, you see, because, and I don't have a problem with it saying the town engineer, but I think the way you described it, Alex, was perfect, because we need to understand that these are our standards as a town, and anything outside of these have to be formally approved through the process. And so I'm not opposing changing this to town engineer. See, and what I'm saying, though, is let's think about this. Some of these things should be looked at through the FDP and the PD process. And I don't know if sidewalks and putting them...
No, in that case, we don't have a problem with, if you want to put planning commission back in or town board.
Right. So I don't either. I'm not suggesting one or the other. I'm just saying that, to be clear, how do we use this document? And the way I understood it, as you described it, is that these are our standards. You can't go below these or outside of these, like minimum or the minimums, unless you get a special approval through the formal process. Right.
But, I'm with Glenn, I'm trying to even think, almost everything we do now is through PD. I guess potentially somewhere, if they decided to put sidewalks in original town or something, that would be outside of a PD, and this would come into play. Or if we redid sidewalks somewhere in Rock Creek.
We had that issue right on the Cold Creek Bridge, you know, do you put sidewalks or not, you know? I mean, and is that, it's a planning issue, but,
It could be a under construction issue, you know, it looked good on paper, but for whatever reason, it, you know, needs a change in time of construction perhaps. Would that be a way it could come forward?
Yeah, I like that description too, to say, these are the standards, unless it's a PD or you're in the throes of construction and it doesn't fit, and there's no sense bringing it back and starting all over. I mean, you know.
The town engineer.
Right, the town engineer can do it.
What page was that on?
let me just take a look.
That's on 232, but it's also referenced to, a similar comment, I think, is on let's see, I thought it was on 2, there's something that was in 2.
Is this in the red line or the other one?
Yeah, it's in the red line. 232. It's 1.2.2.4I.
The other one, right?
Yeah, I think that's the only place where that, the second one I have is actually in 2 places. I'm just trying to think, do we, I mean, so this is gonna, I mean, if it's a PD, we're gonna see it. If it's just, I mean, any developer comes in to do anything, we're gonna see it. And so, but this really just applies primarily to existing development in the town, where the town's going to do or make changes. I mean, and so do we want to know if they're going to do this, you know, in a particular part of town or not? I mean, that's really what this boils down to. We let them just do it, which I think I'm fine with. I think that's the only place it's going to come up, and it's probably going to be pretty rare.
Yeah, you're right here.
And it does say in special cases, so I think what we're saying is we're defining, I don't know if we need to define what a special case is, you know, to make it really clear, or if we want to just assume that in the future, people will understand what a special case is, you know, that it's outside, you've already done the planning, you've done the PDs, you've probably been there before, and in order to enable the reconstruction or the construction, you're going to make the decision on the spot or bring it to the engineer.
That's a good point. So in a PD where the PD was a minimum of 5-foot width that followed the sidewalk width, but a special case came up within the PD or during construction that changed this, and we were following, so I assume that if it's not clearly defined, if it's not defined in the PD, then the code takes, the code rules, right? So if it's not defined in the PD and they come along and decide they can't meet the standard for some particular reason, then they can come to you, even inside of a PD, they can come to staff and...
Right. I think the intent here is more, here, you know, the standards say 5-foot walk, says here, if you want an exception to that, maybe it's more appropriate to have the board, and then you guys can look at it, planning commission can look at it, and town board can look at it to make an exception. Because that's what's really happening with
It's kind of
town.
open. I mean, in most cases, I don't think I care, but if we approve a PD though, and then somewhere during construction, we, you know, or it all gets done, and we come walking in there and go, what in the, wait a minute, this isn't what we said, you know, but, you know, just, you know, not that we wouldn't have agreed with it, but it might not hurt to have.
Well, I think this is exactly what Cal Monte is doing here, because they're coming in, we said, look, you gotta detach the walks. And they said, well, we have a good reason why we think we don't want to. And they're gonna come to you and the town board and make their case.
Right, but it's not going to be the engineer that says that.
I'm saying, that may be appropriate, I don't mind switching this to the town board.
It's almost, I think somewhere we could have a statement, if everyone, you know, and if Alex, you and Dave would feel comfortable. I would feel comfortable to say, in special cases, after a PD has been approved, you know, in order to, I don't know, that makes it too difficult though. But, you know, because there's sometimes you just make a good decision on the spot, rather than having to go through the process again for one little portion of a sidewalk that needs to be attached.
Yeah, I think this is more the planning issue, that they're going to come and they want a variance to the standards. And
Okay, then you
here's
can
our
have it
standards.
board and
If you
not-
want something else, you got to convince planning commission and town board, and that'll be a condition.
Her attorney has a comment.
I just want to interject one point real quick. In terms of changes to an already approved PD or FDP, if the change is large enough and it's a substantial variance from the standards that were approved, under the PD requirements, that needs to come back for approval as an amendment of the PD anyways. So to some extent, that procedure, I think, would catch a lot of these instances that you're discussing in terms of on the fly, something comes up, the PD needs to be varied or modified. The PD procedures would require that to come back to the board.
So then I think it goes back to the board, rather, in this case. Is that what we're hearing?
Well, it sounds like that it's going to get changed before it ever comes to planning commission or the board. That's what I just heard Alex say, was that this is more for pre-PD planning, that they've got that discretion to make that change in their plans.
But that's not what I heard either. But it means, what I'm saying, that wording needs to go back to the original wording, which is it has to be approved by the town board.
Yeah, I don't have.
That's what I'm saying, that we're,
Yeah, because otherwise, because this isn't pre-PD, I mean, if the PD is approved, and this almost becomes,
A moot
could
point.
potentially become in conflict with the PD language, right? Because what is substantial, and so, I mean, this...
But we have a level.
Hmm?
We have a dividing line, which is it's subjective, but it's sort of like, if there's this 10% changes, it has to come before the planning commission and board of trustees.
In the PD's entire...
10% or greater,
The changing the
something like that.
sidewalk width isn't going to be,
No.
that's not a substantial change, and so but within the PD, if it's done, we've approved it, they're out there building, and they go, oh, God, we can't do this, we need to change it, and so what this is saying is that the engineer can do that without it coming back to the town board, and I kind of feel like it probably ought to just stay town board, if it's that, but...
But is it then saying that in order for a developer to bring forth a plan with a zero setback sidewalk, they've got to go to the town board first? I don't think that's what, we don't want that.
no, we would follow the process, which means ultimately it has to be voted on and approved by the town board. It comes through the planning commission. First we go to staff, and then come to the planning commission, we'd make a recommendation to the board, and then the board would make the determination. No one else but the town board can approve a variance from that. That's what that's saying. It doesn't say that it skips. You don't, skip, whatever, how does that go in Monopoly? Go directly to jail, do not pass go. You do not pass the planning commission and go directly to the town board.
Or an exception, or a...
Alex, can you explain a little bit further, though, that I thought I heard you say that this language was what a developer was going to use when they are
Right.
laying out their PD.
That's true.
Is that?
Yeah, when they're laying out they're going to take this.
Yes.
They're going to, here's the width of the road, here's the cross-section, here's how wide the sidewalk is, here's the parkway strip.
These are the
That-
standards.
Right, that's what they start with. But a lot of times, they don't want to do something else. And we saw it in the town center, and we're going to see it in Calmonte. They want something else. And so...
Then they have to bring that to the board.
And then they'll...
Through the planning commission.
Planning commission, and we should have a condition saying, well, it's make a recommendation subject to a cross-section that is different from what's in our standards. And you would approve that, specifically approve a different section as part of that PD.
So my question is, this isn't specified in the PD, right? So the PD may or may, the PD may not even address this. So they don't rewrite the entire land use code in the PD. They apply their changes that they're interested in having different, and then everything else defaults back to the code, right?
Well, normally, town center, we had, 10 cross-sections that you guys approved as part of the design guidelines, some of which were the same as this, but there were several that are different than these standards.
So sidewalk width is left out of the PD. It's not in the PD, so therefore it's going to follow our land use code. And then they're out there working on it, and an issue comes up, and they don't want to do the 7-foot minimum distance because for whatever reason they ran into a construction issue. This is saying that the engineer can approve that on the fly, and I'm questioning whether we want to all of a sudden find out that we thought we had a 7-foot detached, or had a detached sidewalk, and then find out later that it was attached because something came up during construction that they wanted to make that change, and do we want to let the staff approve that, or should that come back to the board?
Well, it's a subjective call in some ways, because how big is this thing they're talking about? All of a sudden, we end up with 2 blocks? Well, that's a problem.
Right.
Okay,
But that's still not 10, it may not be 10%.
Okay? So that's a magnitude of change that I think has some real weight. But if it's a part of maybe it's 20 feet or something, or wherever they've got to do this because of a utility line or something, they've got to do this. That's pretty small. We're down to, but there's a subjective decision that's made there by staff to say this thing is too big to bite off, or it's so small it doesn't matter. Will they make that call?
Should there be some clarification in special cases after construction has started? Because I guess my question still remains that the roadways that we just approved for town center they were the special case. They do not have this 7-foot strip, and we just approved it, but it didn't go to the town board for approval of that. I mean, it did go through the PD process.
Went through the process, right.
But the way I read that is, you've got to get that approval so that you can put it in the plan. Am I not reading, is that not?
No, I think you're reading more into it than is really there. So let's go back, for me, go back to the basic.
We had a big discussion about sidewalk width.
Well, this is.
5 foot, or not, they proposed something else, and we said, no, this is our town standard, and they went to you, they tried to change it, and they...
Oh, in the PD problem.
In the PD, we said no.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. And there was even the sidewalk setbacks and on the curb and off the curb, and, all setbacks for buildings and all that kind of things was discussed with great detail. So I think, though, what we need to go back to is, because we're caught up in what we just went through for the last year, these are the standards, as already been stated. And if anybody wants variances from these standards or to do something different, they have to go through the process, which is, and get approval to vary from these minimum standards. And that's, and this would say then that anybody could come in here and get a variance for this one standard by just going to the town engineer. And I don't think that's what we want.
Yeah.
I think we want to go back to, these are our standards. If you want a variance, you have to go through the process, which is come to staff, talk to them about it, have staff present it to the planning commission, we review it, then we make our recommendations to the board, and the board approves or disapproves or modifies it.
And I think what Fred is saying is that there are situations where, and I really thought about it, you're right, you've got a park and a utility issue, and you got 20 feet of sidewalk that, gee, we kind of need to attach this and we can't meet the standard. Is it okay for them to just, pass that for that 20-foot section because they know better and they know there's really no other great way to do it?
And then I think
to stop and come back to the town board.
Well, let's put one more paragraph at the end here, that there are certain special
Well, that's what they're saying.
No, this is only for, we're talking apples and oranges here, because these are our standards, and how do you get away from the minimum standards? But we're also saying, in some instances, there may be a requirement in order to advance the construction, to allow the town engineer to make the best determination for the town. Like, for example, you could even use the example, 10 feet of sidewalk need to be different than what was originally proposed or something.
Yeah, but you never know what it's going to be. It could be almost anything. And so you can't really define,
This is bigger, though, than just a 10-foot. This is saying that you want to be outside of the minimum standards. for your development, not for 10 feet of sidewalk, but for...
No, understood, but yeah, where do you draw those lines?
Yeah.
10 feet or 20 feet or 30 feet, or, I mean, what if it's, 35 feet, but it's still the same situation? And situations are going to vary from, case by case, so...
I don't have a problem with using best judgment and common sense, because...
I think that's what it's...
Not here. It has to be in a separate space, because this is specifically about sidewalk widths. Our standard is 5 feet, 7 feet off of the curb. Now, in special cases, so we don't want to another developer, I guess we don't have to worry much about it, but because we don't have too much left to develop. But this would allow any developer then to come forth and say, I don't want the 5 foot widths and the 7 feet off the curb. I want you, town engineer, just to give me a variance from this.
But that's not a special, does special case have any meaning, Liz?
If you give it meaning.
Huh?
If you give it meaning.
Because, I
And
would
define it.
consider a developer coming up and wanting to change the sidewalk for, for 3 blocks in his development a special case. That's, I don't think that's what we mean by a special case.
That's what I think the
And maybe
intent
it's-
was originally in 2003 here.
Right,
Was for the
and-
developer to come and say, I want something different than the standard.
Yeah, and Dave just pointed out, this is the only place where we have this. And we
It
could-
is, yeah.
we could strike that and,
Let's
variance,
leave it in town board, and
we can strike that last sentence. and-
Oh, yeah, that's probably even better. Just strike the last sentence, because,
well, there you go,
yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Sentence.
Yeah, just take the whole thing out.
Yeah,
That
and if
is-
anybody wants something, then they have to go through the process, and that's a
Yeah.
great
Good,
solution.
good. Simplify.
All right, let's see, 244 and 247, I think, have the same paragraph. These are my only two, so I just have a couple questions, but 244. Where it says the right-of-way, it's another similar term where we change that 120-foot right-of-way is a minimum requirement. Additional right-of-way may be required based on future transit needs as identified by the town engineer and or planning commission. My only question, I actually don't have a problem with that at all. It was planning department, which would indicate staff,
Right.
and the commission wasn't even identified. Are we trying to just, is that something that's important to bring forward to the, to the planning commission?
Well, we had department in there, we don't really have a department, we have, Fred, we thought it was more appropriate to be commission.
Okay. I don't think I have a real problem with that. It's just jumped out because it was a change from the department to the commission.
I did have a question about that. I think that when I read planning department, to me, that speaks to a staff level
Right.
person or department, which is very different than the planning commission. So I would have concern changing this from planning department to commission just because we share the same first name. I don't think it's the same thing, and
But the town engineer is which, well, in this case, that's...
The other way to get around it, just say staff.
As identified by town staff and the planning commission. Do we want to...
I just don't know why planning commission, I don't think the intent in 2003 was to have planning commission be a part of that, and I don't know that, and I don't know that it should be now.
Additional right-of-way may be required based on future transit needs as identified by... Yeah, there'd be a ton of places where we could identify things besides right-of-way that we're not doing now.
Well, the town engineer is, to me, I'm looking to create, we've had a town engineer that was, we had a consultant performing that role. Now we have professional engineers on staff, so we're going to have, a person that has criteria, has the background and has a professional engineer's license that are making these decisions, especially the engineering decisions. So that's why I provided references to the town engineer.
I don't think we need to be part of that.
Yeah, it's, why are we picking on right-of-way? You could say this for anything, right? Traffic control, as identified by the planning commission.
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to have planning commission.
Yeah, I would say just take it out and as identified by staff or by the town engineer. I don't think we're going to be identifying this kind of stuff.
Well, we're not going to have any major arterials anyway, so.
No.
Well, it's actually, it's in two places. Yeah, so it's on 244 and 247. I'd say scratch the planning commission.
I had the same comment.
Yeah. And my other comments aren't so much in the document, so whatever you're.
Well, that one, we say town engineer or planning commission, so.
We're just saying take out planning commission, because we're not identifying things. That's, right? I mean,
Well, I think, well, if a developer or a development, an area needed more right-of-way, and it's to have an impact on people around them, or we're requiring them to have more right-of-way, somewhere the planning commission and the town board perhaps have to be involved. I mean, if you're talking about changing legal ownership and things like that, so
Yeah, but
I don't know what this means.
I don't think this comes into play.
Yeah.
Because
Well, it's requiring additional right-of-way, so I don't know who's requiring it.
It's the identification of the need for more right-of-way,
Yeah.
and that's where we don't have the credentials.
That's why you're paying an engineer.
That's what we have in general.
And for example, like Marshall Road out there where we have a lot of turn lanes, medians and so forth, you need, and a lot of that is based on traffic studies and so forth, which are more technical issues that are more in the domain of the town engineer. But there may be planning, I mean, I said put in or because there may be other planning issues that the planning commission would want to.
Maybe it fits in with the transportation planning
Right.
plan that we are, that we proposed and got approved.
Sure.
And as we plan for that and work it, work the transportation plan, I don't know. I don't know why it was in there in the first place, so it's.
Well, I think I don't know that it was in there in the first place.
No, I mean the right-of-way even, the whole idea of requiring right-of-way, when more right-of-way is required, who would determine, or why would we determine that more right-of-way is required?
Well, you may want to have a wide median, you may want to have a wider separation of the walks from the travel lane, travel lane. You may
Okay, so
have-
then it would go through the process
But I'm saying,
anyway.
why right-of-way? I mean, there's 30,000 other things in here that the planning commission could identify. Why are we now involved in the identification of additional right-of-way?
I think we're striking at other sentences,
Yeah.
aren't we? Isn't this sentence kind of gone
I think that should
everywhere?
just be gone. I think I agree.
So the whole sentence or just planning?
When they take planning commission out, however you want to word it.
Yeah, then that leaves staff the opportunity to weigh in. And,
It'll come to us and
Yeah.
change. We're going to see it. It's just, right. All right, so my other questions are sort of outside of the document. I live here in Richland Town, so I drive up and down Coal Creek, which is wasn't done that long ago, maybe probably longer than I think. What's it been, 7, 8, 10 years? Has it been that long? We did that streetscape.
2005.
And that road's kind of, it's a shame what shape it's in. And the two issues, one, just the seeming general collapse of spots in the road where there are these big dips, and then and so I'm kind of curious if we're addressing that in this document. And then the other, they're trying to prevent that from happening. Then the other is these cut-ins, right? So you don't have that in Rock Creek because it's all planned. But here, somebody builds a house and somebody comes in, they cut the road, they got to put in the sewer, and they patch it, and it's usually not a good job.
Right.
So I'm just more interested in knowing, are we addressing that in this update? I know you're aware of the issues on Coal Creek Drive, I'm just.
Yeah, as far as I know, some of the issues with Coal Creek Drive was both pretty lax inspections, and also we had a contractor that was going belly up and cutting corners during that whole construction period. And so, combination of those factors, it wasn't proper backfill on the utilities, and you had a lot of settlement going on. And so we're addressing it both with some tough, I'm not sure if that specifically is addressed here, but I know in terms of our inspection, we now have a full-time construction inspector that's really on top of the contractors and looking out to make sure those things don't happen in the future.
Okay, and then the cut-ins, or the other, and again, I'm not sure where this falls, but in places where the roadway has to be removed in order to do something, whether it's a cut for a house, whether it's, something utility related. I mean, some issues not that I've seen here, but in Boulder, for example, they extended a left turn lane, and, it's just horrible, that the extension piece is just done so poorly. Do we address that type?
We have also,
not new roadway, but changing.
I think we have a patching standards on July 42. We have a new patching standard that for any time the road is cut, there's a new standard on how to repair the cut that's different than what we had before, and a much more beefier standard and a better way to do it. We also have requirements, I think, in terms of, a new pavement. We don't want utilities coming back the next year, so I think we have a time period that they can't cut new pavements for several years. Right-of-way standards.
Well, to the end user, the driver, the issue is really bottom line how it looks and how it feels when you're driving down the road. I don't know how you account for that in roadway standards, but all of a sudden, you have a dip in the road because of the way it was patched, or you have a raise in the road because of how it was patched.
Right.
Do we have the ability to go back to the contractor? Do our standards account for that? So, this is...
We have a right-of-way permit process, so utility companies, other companies that want to work in our right-of-way have to take out a permit. And we have performance guarantees, so we collect money up front, a deposit, to make sure that if it isn't constructed, we'll put back in place the way we want it. We have the ability to...
Yeah, and that's part of my question is how do we want it? 'Cause right now, the way it's being done on Coal Creek, I'd say that's not the way we want it. It's, and I don't know that you can do any better. Just in some of these cases of...
You mean the ones on Coal Creek or the one,
The ones on Coal Creek Drive. I'm just, using that as an example.
If you've seen the ones we've done on 2nd Avenue and on Maple, or kind
I
of
don't
new
drive
ways.
those routinely, so probably not. I can go look at them, but are those much better? So-
We hope they will.
And so do we, I guess my question is, and that's great. My question is that addressed in the code somehow, that when that situation happens, that it's not like Maple and 2nd Avenue, which you said are great, that we can identify that and have some, I don't know if there's a 1 year, 2 year warranty on that kind of stuff, but
And
you can address when it happens.
I think with the new patching, we have one way. We also have requirements for boring under certain streets, like, on our arterials. We don't want our arterials cut, and so normally we require that they bore under the road rather than cut the road.
And I think my question is, and it's on its own view, if it's patched, we want it to be smooth, and so is that identified in the document?
You're asking for so much.
It's a bottom line. Is there something in the document that says this needs to be relatively smooth when you finish patching? I don't know how you say it.
Well, we have standards that it means to, I think it does say it somewhere in there that it needs to meet the existing roadway and be consistent with and stuff like that.
I'm mostly curious about, just so when I see the issues, I know what's reasonable to bring up when these come up, so.
Oh, look at that. Dave knows
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm assuming it is in there. I'm just kind of curious what it looks like. Okay. So this is supposed to be smooth, almost perfectly smooth. I like that level line. Never seen one done that way.
Yeah, so this is a drawing we've added, and, typically, you dig a trench, you fill it up with some stuff, and then you add some asphalt. And that creates, a problem at the at the seams.
Yeah, so how big of a bump are they allowed to have there before it's a problem? Or how big of a dip are they allowed to have there
So this is
before
called
it's
a
a problem?
T-patch, okay. So they have to put this in, and we have some issues about densities they have to meet for the road base that they're putting back in. We have testing requirements for that. And then you put a T-patch where you're filling with asphalt, but you're also cutting out a 2-foot area on both sides, so that you have some support here, and then this becomes a better drivable surface with this T-patch. And this is what our new construction inspector, this is the technique he's used in the past, and it results in a much better patch than...
So is this new in this?
This is new in our standards, yes.
Okay. And I guess I come back to my question, if we end up with a bulge or a dip in the road, how do we have recourse to get that corrected?
Well, there's two ways. Who did it? If it's Excel or Comcast or other entities that we have done, that we deal with all
They're bigger than
the
us,
time.
not, and-
But more likely, it's their subs, that we have to deal with them first, and then if we're not getting performance from them, we got to go to who they're working for. But we've had some issues, but I think it's really, we have a construction inspector that's really bird dogging these things now, that are making sure that it's not
And
gonna
are
happen.
those issues, do they belong in the design standards? Like, that we have an expectation that this is going to be relatively level?
We have it here, and we also have right-of-way permit requirements. And those requirements, we have requirements for performance guarantees, that they have to post a certain amount of money to cover. We look at the cost of the improvement, and we make sure they post a like amount, either in letter of credit or of deposit and so forth. And then we go out and inspect it when it's done, and if we don't feel like it's been done right and they skip town, we have some money to go back and repair it.
Yeah, and I think my question's a little simpler than this, and I'll leave it be if I can't get it across. But if that asphalt patch is, instead of like this, it's like this, and we know that that's not okay, is there something in the document that says that that's not okay? It's not okay to have a dip, like this, or it's not okay to have a bump in the road? Or is that assumed by the fact that you've got an absolutely perfectly level patch, which has never happened that I've ever seen? It's never that level, right? So what's reasonable? At what point is it a problem? And is that point identified in the document anywhere?
So one of the benefits of having the new specifications that are in Chapter 4 is there's a installation tolerances.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
So it's got, for all the different layers that you're putting in, what tolerance it has to have, and it's got it's basically, for the surface coat, 1/8 of an inch over a 10-foot length is the tolerance we have in here, so
That's not
tight.
Okay.
So,
All right.
it's flat.
Okay, so we can call
So it is covered in here.
Okay, all right, okay. Let's see, I think that's, my only other one was just, and I don't know where frequency of paving and replacement, does that fall in these guidelines, like how often we're going to repave, or is it purely on an as needed, or do we have routine times? Does that fall in the design criteria and standards for the town? or-
This is really just for kind of new design.
How you do it?
Yeah, exactly. Not
novel.
necessarily how we would, as town staff, come and investigate our roadways and determine where repairs are needed.
Okay. Okay. That's all I got, sorry.
Okay, Commissioner Eaton?
No comment.
Okay. Commissioner Momartz, anything? Okay. Commissioner Dozell?
I have just a couple other, there's another spot toward the end, 2.1, general, item A, for plan developments applying through the planning department. It says, not commission, I don't know where we're at and which word we're going to put in there. And then, so that's on 2.1, so it says planning department, and you've changed every other time to commission. And then public, and then B is Public Works Division, and I think we changed that to department now, have you? Or do you want to change it to engineer? Okay, so that's just a couple of, those are under 2.1A and 2.1B. And then this one area, it says posted speeds for 45 to 50 miles per hour for major 4-lane, 2 lanes in each direction. And do we ever have anything at 50 miles per hour? I don't know. I know we don't have to make it, but if it's in there, I think that someone may come and say, well, your standards are 45 to 50 miles per hour for, that's like on page 244 or something like that, around that area. And I just question the 50 miles per hour. I can't imagine we'd ever have a street in Superior that would be 50 miles per hour. It's just like even going up McCaslin here, 45, well, it's changed now to 25, which is really not very well noticed. I've seen a lot of people picked up there already since that's gone down to 25 miles per hour right out here on McCaslin.
Out here. 40 miles an hour coming down the hill.
I know, it went from 45 to 40, but the speed thing still shows you at okay at 45, not at 40. And, you know, so you're not flashing
Where
at,
does it become 25?
right where the big pile of dirt and everything is now.
Now.
You know, so on McCaslin, coming north on McCaslin. But it's 25 miles per hour, which is a big drop, and you're not used to it. You think you can go 45, then to 40. Anyway, so this 50 miles per hour, I can find the exact page. Did you find it there?
I got it. It's actually just 2 spots.
Okay.
1.2.2.8 and 1.2.2.9.
I just am questioning, do we need to have 50 miles per hour? 45 could be enough, but it's fine, because I don't think we'll ever allow any 50 miles per hour, but it just struck me as kind of odd when I saw it.
Yeah, now that's been around for
Right.
20 years. and we really
Right.
take a look at it.
Right. Okay, and then the table 1.1, which were roadway requirements, there weren't any changes to that, right? I didn't see any red lines. Were there any changes to that?
That's correct. No, there were not.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I was also looking at 1.2.2.1, which is alleys. And now alleys, we've never really had too many alleys in the Rock Creek development area. I don't know if we have any, actually. But we're going to have some perhaps in the town center. And I don't know that I ever realized there were standards for alleys. So it's kind of interesting if the towns, how different they are from, what got completed in the PD plan versus what was included in here. And the one thing that I saw that I read with kind of interest too is, continuity setbacks for rear yard structures shall be a minimum of 8 feet from property line. I think most every place else, it's 5 feet is the minimum setback. But I don't know if that's going to be a conflict or anything like that, but I was surprised about that anyway, why it says 8 feet. That's 1.2.2.1 alleys, item C. And I don't know if that needs to be changed or, it's 8 feet. I've never heard anything in Superior as an 8-foot setback.
Yeah, that is a big setback, isn't it?
Well, it's not a big setback, because normally it's 15 feet.
Oh, for-
Or 5 is the minimum, but so there's never been, you're kind of in between there for alleys, structures on alleys. I don't know if it will ever apply,
I
because...
guess I'm looking at it from the original town perspective, where our stuff sits on the alley, but it's been there for 100 years, so
Right,
it's probably grandfathered in. But-
Yeah.
But
So
when you think about alleys, I mean, you walk down, like, even through Louisville and back alleys, I mean, things are pretty close to the alleyway.
Oh, but this is for new construction, see?
No,
so-
understood, but I mean,
Yeah.
there is, I mean, that feeling's kind of neat. I mean, I'd probably be opposed to making it farther than 8 feet, but, I mean, I'd be more inclined to move it closer, just because I think that's what makes an alley, but,
Except if you want to put anything around the structure, or even park a car kind of in front, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just not had experience of an alley.
Garages, typically garages are off the alley.
Right.
And if they're, sometimes you park in front of your garage, so you don't want those those garages too close to the alley where people are driving.
Yeah, but 8 feet doesn't work. That, I mean, there are a lot of trucks that are longer than
Well,
8 feet.
at least 8 feet, you could park a car between the structure and the actual driveway, the alley.
Sideways, right, yeah, but that's about it.
Yeah, my question though
I
is
don't know,
that, why is that there, and do we want it there? And if it's there, is 8 feet appropriate, or is a different number appropriate?
Okay, I don't know, I mean, it's been there, I don't know, we didn't change it, so it's been
A
there.
lot of times, things are there because we take another document that was done for another town and apply it to our town. So now we need to say, is it
I know in this case, did I add the horizontal thing about the town engineer?
I don't think our setbacks deal with the issue of a garage that's got the garage door on the alley. What it deals with is purely the structure, which I think is normally a minimum of 10 feet. Now, if you're going to have your garage on the alley plus the door facing the alley, that's when this one would kick in, or something greater or smaller, whatever number you have, but it's not in our standard setbacks.
Because you've got a 16-foot right-of-way width, if you, and a standard backup distance to get out of a garage is 24.
Right.
So if you take 16 plus the 8, you get 24. So I'm wondering if it's to hold, because if you put your garage right on the alley, in theory, if someone right across the street from you did the same thing, you'd
Oh,
never
yeah.
be able to get out of your garage.
Right,
So
right.
I think, my interpretation would be that it's to get to the 24-foot, so you're able to get out of the garage.
To back out of the
Yeah.
garage.
But this just says rear setback, or rear yard structures, doesn't necessarily say garages specifically.
Right, right. So just, I'd say, you all that know these kind of things, think about that and see if that makes sense, because I didn't know if it made sense or not, and I'd never heard the 8 feet number before in any discussion. It's always like 5 or 15 or 24 or something like that. Yeah.
If you do, I mean, if you're looking to, I guess if we identify garages, then you also have to, you're going to have to identify structures separately, right? You don't have to do both, so.
And then one other place where 3.1.3, which is almost to the end, it says engineering division, and I don't know if that should be town engineer or, or public works department, but it says on 3.1.3, it says engineering division. And then my last comments are that I really like the front part of this, and I don't know, it's great when it says the planning principles, 1.2.1, that, and then the 4 factors are safety, efficiency, livability, and economy. And I think sometimes we forget those things when we're looking at a plan or approving something and even to ensure vehicular and pedestrian access, but minimizing through trips, control access to arterials, discourage speeding, minimize pedestrian vehicular conflicts, minimize space devoted to street use. I love all those things, and sometimes I think we forget to consider all those principles. We just go to the numbers, but we don't think about the larger vision or concept and principles, and we should keep those in mind too as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, good comments. I just had 1 or 2 others. Commissioner Dozell got most of the ones I had. Let's see, Chapter 1, 1.2.2, it said or parking.
1.2.
1.2.2.2, F. We're in private streets, and the word "or" parking was struck from there, and I just was kind of wondering why that was struck. I guess wondering why parking was restricted, perhaps.
Right here?
Yes.
Which one are we looking at? F?
Yes, F. Just wondering why that was, why was "or" parking struck from there?
Well, because it says, notes, we feel that a lot of private roads have parking on them.
Yes.
I mean, why would we?
Well, it seems strange that it was ever in there from the first place.
Why was it in there
That's
to
the
begin
Okay.
with?
Okay, good.
That's what we want,
Then-
parking on those, on the local park roads.
Exactly. Okay. Then, section 1.16, fire lanes, that's another place where you've got planning department change to commission, and probably should just be town engineer. 1.16,
Take out planning.
take out planning commission. Then my final thing was in chapter 3, several places in chapter 3 references town approval, but it doesn't specify town engineer or anyone other than town, and maybe that's sufficient, but it just seemed at odds with chapters 1 and 2, which specified town engineer. So, just from a consistency standpoint, maybe that could be made consistent.
I think they got tired when they got down to chapter 3.
That term, town approval, shows up, I'm just doing a quick search of that term, and it shows up at least 5 or 6 times, so maybe it's worth just being consistent, yeah.
Okay, anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to, are we making a motion to,
Are we moving to recommend?
moving to recommend?
Yeah, the motion's written in here.
Yes.
Okay.
There it is. Okay, should I go?
Go ahead.
Move to approve a recommendation to the town, to the Board of Trustees of an amendment. Move to approve a recommendation to the Board of Trustees of an amendment to the Town of Superior roadway design criteria and standards manual from December 2013.
With changes or minor changes as
Yeah, with minor-
discussed.
Yeah, we say with minor changes as identified, have those been?
Yes, with the recommended changes identified to staff is made.
Yeah, with recommended changes that's identified.
Okay, motion by Commissioner McCool.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Dozell, I'm sorry, Commissioner Eden. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Okay, item number 7 is staff announcements, miscellaneous.
I would just mention that the staff is, at this point, working through the PD amendment as applied for by the Calmonte, which would be Boulder Creek Builders. We do not have a planning commission date for review yet. We are also working on a PD amendment for the Discovery Office Park. That's also in conjunction with the Superior Town Center group, because they're doing some land swaps so they can reroute Discovery Park Drive. And so that'll be a fairly complicated, because we got 2 proposals combined together. And so we're working on that. We do not have any planning commission meetings identified for that either. My suspicion is that the Calmonte project will come up first, because it's smaller and it's easier to digest, and it's not as complicated, to be quite frank. So we will have for the Calmonte 2, a plan development amendment, which is really a zoning change, and then a preliminary plat. And then they will come back later. If the zoning's approved, they will ultimately come back with a final plat and a final development plan. So get through the zoning first. I think that's all I have. But do you have one?
A couple of things. We had originally discussed bringing the Coal Creek Bridge and the Coal Creek Flood Mitigation Project to the town, to the Planning Commission this evening. But when we had our initial meeting a couple of weeks ago, there were a lot of issues that were raised at that time. So we're kind of back at the drawing board trying to evaluate various options. But there are some planning issues, including to include sidewalks on the bridge. If there's a new structure, to include sidewalks. How wide should that structure be? What should the treatment be on the abutments and wing walls? Should there be a trail, provide for a trail under the bridge or not? So there are some planning issues, but we haven't worked all those out and looking at the feasibility and whether we should do the bridge first versus do any other channel improvements. So just to let you know that those discussions and evaluations are going on. Also, we're getting ready for our street project this summer, and one of the projects that we have is the reconstruction of Indiana from El Dorado Drive to Rock Creek Parkway. And there's several options involving parking and access and sidewalks and things of that nature. And the board's going to be discussing some of those on Monday at their meeting. We're going to have a community meeting on those issues. I'm not sure if the planning commission will get to see that because I'm not sure if there's going to be a big change that's going to occur. So if there are, and we have some time, we'll come back to the planning commission. But you're welcome to come to the board meeting on Monday to hear about the various options and what the costs are and the impacts of some of those options are.
We get an update on just kind of what's going on with 36 and where things are and the diverging diamond.
On what?
Just the call to construction here on 36 and timing of things.
On the DDI, yeah, we've been meeting probably every couple of weeks on various design issues. One thing that we showed you, the landscape on the plans. Did we show you the landscape plan for that area where, the eastbound ramp, where the loop is now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the loop goes away and the eastbound ramp gets reconstructed. So there's a whole area north of the marketplace that the trail's going to go through. We'll have the underpass. And so we've been looking at various landscape concepts, and we're trying to get CDOT to do some of them or not, but let me just pull that up for you.
Yeah, I think you showed that to the board, but I don't think it's been before.
No, go down, yeah, take a look at this. Yeah, well, go back to, yeah, that's the old original one. Go down. Yeah, okay, yeah. I'll point this out.
Great when they have a server, they can get anything.
The loop is in this area. This, you look northbound, Brakes Plus is over here. You have Chuck E. Cheese and Whole Foods down here. So right now, the sidewalk kind of swings along here, and you have the eastbound ramp that kind of comes like this. Well, that eastbound ramp gets moved because the loop goes away up to here, and we're putting the pedestrian underpass here. So we wanted to come up with some landscape concepts. We never really looked at what was going to go back in. And so we hired a landscape architect that had originally done some concepts on the DDI to give us some concepts about how the path should go, and we're looking at a more direct connection to the BRT station from the underpass, which is a little different from what what CDOT had shown. So we're trying to get them to at least build this, and then we would come back and do some of the landscaping at a little higher level than the rest of the DDI. But you can see, and then we want to upgrade. This is the underpass, maybe put some flower beds and spruce that up as you're going down through. So that's one thing that's been occurring, and we're working with them. Lighting has been a big issue about both lighting on the structure itself, lighting for the bike path, lighting for the ramps, and whether we should have LED lighting or not. And so we've been working with CDOT, and we would like to have LED lighting for the entire interchange, and that will be a cost to us to upgrade. And then pedestrian lighting on the bridge was never really specified, and what they're proposing. You know, we have the Jersey barriers, the concrete barriers on the bridge. We have this central walkway in the center of the bridge, and they're proposing these called step lights, kind of lights on the concrete barriers. So every 15, 20 feet, there'll be a little light set into the barrier, which is a little different. We wanted overhead lighting, but it was difficult of how to put that on, you know, because you have this arch that goes across, so where the lights would kind of stick out through the arch. It was kind of difficult to get overhead lighting on that. But we wanted to make sure the crossings are lit up wherever we cross travel lanes, that we have added lighting. So landscape has been an issue in lighting. What other things there? Other than that, you know, they're proceeding along, and we've been reviewing all their plans and providing input every step of the way.
What's coming up on McCaslin now that the signs are up? What's... So we have the signs up.
They'll be starting construction in the next week or so, and the first thing they're going to do is, you know, where Breaks Plus is, there's going to be a retaining wall, and that's going to have to be widened along here. And the bridge gets widened, all the widening on the bridge occurs on the east side of the bridge.
Okay.
So they're going to be essentially closing down the east side, taking the lane away, and working on the east side of the bridge. The loop will still stay in place. They're not going to take any lanes away, at least until August or September. You'll see the real issues occur when they take the loop away and we start having lanes taken away. So be, instead of the loop, we'll have left turns going to Denver as well as left turns going to Boulder, like it was 10 years ago. And that'll cause some real problems.
Will the trucks be done doing their little loop here? That's kind of killing things right now already. They're coming up here and they make this left turn. You get them in there, and
I'm sure they'll be doing that for a number of years. But this will be the start of about 18-month construction period.
Okay.
And we'll have lane closures, so avoid the interchange if you can.
This sounds like a service.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have anything else? Commissioner Mazel?
For our dinner Monday night with the town board,
Yes.
do we want to prepare an agenda, or have you prepared an agenda so that we can kind of structure it a little bit as we meet with them and effectively use our time?
Sure.
with them?
I suggested to the town manager that we do the 2014 work plan and also talk about FDP procedures between planning commission and town board, and I think that will more than take up an hour and a half.
Right. I think that's great. That's perfect. And then if we can come and think about some of the things that we think would be helpful to help the process along and to
Yes.
and ask them, that would be really good. Okay.
Yes.
That's-
Thank you. for
thank you.
mentioning that.
And what time is that?
5:30.
He's coming Monday? Thank you.
Is everybody here planning to be here? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. We're adjourned.